Hi viewers, and welcome to the channel, and we're now on part 6 of the Python series, and that's looking at Python and learning Python from a FreeCAD perspective. If you're new to this channel isn't just about Python. So on Sundays we deal with Python in FreeCAD. During the week we do mainly modeling and animation. And also at the moment I'm running this mini series, so we're on part 6 I believe of this mini series. And this is from Python from the ground up. So if you're new to Python, but you've been using FreeCAD for a while and you want to get into that scripting, then this really is the course for you. At the moment, we're looking at the interaction between two parts. So at the moment, we've got a cube from the part workbench and a shape from the part design. And we're looking at how to detect basically an interaction with those two, a clash or a collision, and to detect when that happens and color those solids retrospectively. At the moment we're looking at just using a vector to do that collision. I'm going to show you a better example of that using a much better command that checks the whole object rather than just the vectors. We also looked at if statements in our previous video. In this video we're looking at if statements again, but we're looking at nested ifs, and we're going to start looking at the for loop. We're also going to look more at the FreeCAD GUI API, because we're going to be actually selecting a number of items in there. So I'm going to take this cube and create a number of other cubes and detect the collisions of those between each other and also that body. And we're going to slowly build that up. We're actually creating a kind of BIM class detection for our models in there. So I've taken that as an example to actually grow our learning on. It's best to have something that you can actually picture in real life and see it working in real life, and rather than just plugging away at commands in there. And we're going to start looking at getting those objects that we've selected. So if we multi-selected objects, how to get those from FreeCAD. So I hope you're enjoying this journey, and let's get started with this tutorial. If you like this video, please hit a like and also subscribe to the channel. I also have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate to my contributions to the community, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at what we've already got. So we detect if we have a collision or a clash between two objects, and we're using a vector to find out if the vector's inside this body here. So we will look at our macro here. We can see we take the document, which is the active document. We take the box from the doc.getObject and the body doc.getObject. And that box and body, and those are IDs of those objects in there. So go back to the model, we can see that cube is a box and that body is called body if you look down the bottom left. This is an API called FreeCAD, and this one here is an API called FreeCAD GUI, which we went over in the previous tutorial. They both are different. FreeCAD API deals with placement, the X, Y, Z position, length, height, the properties of the object, not the visualization. So faces, edges, vertexes, etc. will be in the FreeCAD. Color, line width, point size will be in the FreeCAD GUI, because that's affected from the actual GUI itself. So anything like that, shade color, is in the GUI. So that's an API as well. At the moment, if I try to run this is going to fail because I've actually saved this document and we've got this get document unnamed. So our document is no longer called unnamed. So we need to change these, start with, to active document. And we'll do the same for this one as well. So at the moment we've got a clash between these two. And if I move this away, and we're looking at this vector here, seeing if this clashes, then if I run that now, macros, execute macro, that's run, and we go back, and that's now changed to green. Because it comes down into this, if body.shape.inside, box.placement.base, that's a vector. We're checking to see if that vector is inside that body. If it is, we color the shape red. So we've got RGB, red, green, blue, and that goes from 0 to 1, and everything in between is an intensity of that color. So that's full intensity red there, and if they're okay, if they haven't collided, then we do a full intensity on the green, which we have at the moment. We bring these together, they've collided, and we run this, macro, execute macro, that changes to red. Now if I place this on the other side, so that vertex there is the placement vertex, that will be outside this box because we're only checking one vertex at the moment. So if I macro, execute macro that, this will be back as green, but they have collided. So how do we solve that? Well, there's another function in there called proximity, and it's much better at detecting collisions between objects. Proximity brings back the number of faces and which ones have collided. So we can change that in here, and what we'll do is we'll copy these because this gives us the setup of our variables. So now I've just pasted those into the Python console. The doc will be the FreeCAD active document, and the box and the body will be assigned up. So if I did box and body, you can see those two are a part feature for the box, and the body is the body object, which are these two here. So if I go to box dot, and everything's done from the shape, and if we go to dot and type in proximity, there it is. Look at that, it says it returns two lists of faces, the index for the faces involved in the intersection, and it requires a shape. So box.shape.proximity, and we put in body.shape and close the brackets, and that brings back a tuple which has two lists in there. The first one is in square brackets, so that'll be a list 2, 3, 4 and 5. The second one 4, 5 and 6. So we'll go back to our model and have a look. So we'll look at what we've got. So the first one is the box, which is 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we're checking on the box, this is the first one. The body is the second one, 4, 5 and 6. We'll look at 4, 5 and 6. And what I'm going to do is just OK that, and we'll be able to roll over. We can see 6 is intersected. This one here, go down at the bottom, that's 4. And the other one, the bottom here, is 5. So you can see that part has intersected. That's the body, and we've got 2, 3, 4 and 5 of this one. So this one here is 2, the bottom one is 5, this side which is 4, we're missing 3, which is one here. So we're going to use that one there. We're going to use it inside here. So what we're going to do is spread that across two variables. Now we used the spread operator before, and I'm going to use box faces and body faces. And that equals to box.shape.proximity, and in brackets the shape, which is the body.shape. So don't know what a spread operator is. It allows you to spread the result across a number of variables. So this pulls back a tuple which has two results in. So we can see here two results. First one is the box, the second one is the body. And what we've done is we've broken out that into two variables by using the spread operator. So I hit that, if I do box faces, you can see we've got that one, and body faces, you can see we've got that one. So we can now do, let's get rid of this. So we can now change this, so we can say if box faces, and I'm going to put, I've placed a bracket around there, but I need a length in there to check their length, greater than 0, and the length of the body faces greater than 0. Then we can actually do the FreeCAD GUI active document get body.shape color, full red or it's full green. It would probably be okay just to do one of these, like so. But I'm just being doubly cautious and just doing it with two. So I'm using an if condition and a logical operator there, the AND. Let's execute that. All good, so we can see there is a collision there. And if I transform that, so it's fully out, okay that. Macro, execute macro, that should be green now. So that's all working. For the demonstration of our nested if, I want to say change the intensity of the red depending if we're fully in or partly in. So if we're fully in, we'll go full red. If we're partly in, we'll just reduce that red down. So we've got our box. I'm going to count the number of faces on there because we're going to check the length of the faces. So box.shape, let's come down here, box.shape.faces, and then if we hit enter, that pulls back all the faces. And if we do a length on that, then box faces, that will tell me how many faces there are. So I'm going to use that. And in here, I'm going to do box face count equals that. So we've got our box face count, and in here I'm just going to hit enter so we section these out a bit. We've got the length of the box faces, and I'm going to drop into here and say if the length of the box faces, don't need that bracket there, let's take that out, and that's come back as 6, so we've got 6 faces there. So I'm going to remove the top face, so I'm just going to say 5 equals, so double equals the box face count minus 1. I'll put a colon on the end, so we're just saying if all the sides of the box except for one side, which will be the top, at the intersect. So we know if it's basically fully in, then we'll tab this over. Else, and then we'll tab over, and this is just going to be partly red. So I'm going to come in here and use the same, but we're going to use this and just reduce it down to half red. Else we're doing the shade color as green. So we've got a nested if here. This is a nested if. So we do one if. If that's true, then we drop down to the next if. And we've got a nested else as well. So that block there, that condition block, is nested in. So we're going down, stepping forward, checking this one, stepping forward, doing this, coming back, doing this if it's not, and then coming back down. We'll bypass this else because it's part of this if, in line with this if, and then all's good. So this is your program flow. Let's execute that. It's executed fine. See, it's green at the moment. Let's transform the body so it's just partly in. So that should mean the bottom, this side here, this side and this side should all be in. The 4 sides are in. Macro, execute the macro. See, that's a red there. And then we move that in. Execute the macro. And that's changed that red. So you can see now how that nested if works. and move this all the way out. Macro, execute macro, and there you go. So that's the nested if. What we're going to do now is add another cube to our model and check both those cubes. What we're looking for is an interaction with each of those objects. So we're going to start getting to the for loop now. We're also going to expose something else from the FreeCAD GUI, and that's the selection. So at the moment, if I select this cube here and go up to View, Panels, Selection View, here's our selection view. Select that one, you can see that's been placed in there. Select this one, the pad's been placed in there, or the body. Control, select the other one, we've got two in there. So what's happening when you select those, it actually gets added to there. But we can get to that. If I come down here and do our FreeCAD GUI, dot, and in here's a selection object, there is. So it's a selection module sitting there. I hit enter, module selection. If I do a dot on there and do get selection, which is a function, open and close those brackets, I get both those parts in there. So I've got part design pad and a part feature. And you notice the types, these are the types of them. So this is the same as our box. So that type there, part feature, that one there, and the part design pad is the body. And our body, if I type that in, equals, press the up arrow, and you can see we've got the get object body in there. So we've got that from the body, and our doc equals, press the up, that tells you what that's assigned to, the FreeCAD active document. So this is the reason why I've picked the part and the part design to place those on there, because it makes it much easier for our demonstration to come back and see which ones those are. So I'm going to add another part to this, and I'm going to add a cylinder instead. So I added a cylinder there, and we'll transform that, place that out the way, see how that interacts. Okay, that's fine. So we've got a cylinder and a box, and we want to colour these if they've interacted with each other. So if they're red, there's a clash there. If they're green, they're all good. Let's come back to our macro. And I'm going to change this slightly because I'm not going to bother about checking for face count in there. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to take out this else and bring this back. We're also not going to check for the different boxes because we want to check on a selection. So we've got to actually go through that selection. So we don't need that. We don't need this body. We don't need the box face count, and we don't need the document. We will need these shape colors. So I'm going to just take that else out. I'm going to leave those two, and I'm just going to run them out so you can't see them. I've got a color on this rem, so it makes it white, so you just can't see them, but I know they're there. So really, we start with a blank canvas. I want to get those selected objects. So if you remember from our command, which is the FreeCAD GUI selection, get selection, that pulls back those objects. So none have been selected at the moment because we got back an empty list. This is our first command. So selection, the variable selection, I'm going to use equals FreeCAD selection, get selection. I want to make sure that the length, len, of that selection is greater than 0. So we've selected something. If I have, then we're going to do something. So I'm going to put the pass in here, not the pad. Else, I want to output a message, and that's FreeCAD.console.printMessage. No selection. And I'm going to place that in double quotes instead of single. Doesn't matter what quotes you use, but just keep the same quotes throughout your programming. So that's our first part. Let's execute that. And we can see it's come up no selection because we haven't selected anything. So that's good, that's working. We next have to go through each of these objects. Now for that, I'm going to use a for loop. So we're getting into the for loop now. And we're going to use something called a for with an in statement. And an in statement allows you to actually look at lists, look at tuples, look at ranges. And for each of those in there, it will do something. So if I did my range, R equals range 0 to 10, and if I just type R in there, you can see that's a range. So if I did R as a list R, you can see we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. So if I do for A in R, so I'm saying for each element that's in R, assign it to A, colon, got the double dots here, which means we need to add more. And I'm just going to put print A. And when that's printed, if I hit enter again, you can see we've gone through from 0 to 9, and A will equal each of those each time it goes around. That's how a for loop works. We can also do that if I go back to the selection, which has got nothing in there at the moment, and I'm just going to assign that to the selection. Let's go back here, selection equals that. Now if I do for A in selection, colon, tab over, print A, then that will print nothing first of all. If we go back and select all of these, there we go, and use that same command. So for A in selection, and then pressing up to get back to the print A, hit enter, still got nothing in there. That's because I haven't redefined the selection. So selection, there we go, so we've redefined that selection. So let's go back for A in selection and print A, hit enter. You can see we've got those three coming out. So each time it goes around, A will equal the part feature, then the pad, and then the other part feature. So we can get to those with the for loop. Let's go back to our macro and have a look. So if a selection is greater than 0, got this pass in here. Let's go for, and I'm going to say, now these are parts and part designs. So these are objects. So I'm going to say my object, my obj in selection, colon, then we tab in, and then we're going to use that print my obj. And if we execute that macro, execute macro, and what we need to do is look at the report view, panels, report view, and we can see those have been selected there. Let's clear that. Execute that again. Macros, execute macro. We can see those are coming through. So we can do stuff with these now. Now we've got them. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in and use one of these and clear the color of it. So we're going to set the colors to green. And we need to use the FreeCAD GUI. So that's Control X that. Make sure we get rid of the indent. And I'm going to come in here, tab in, and place it in here. But we've got a problem in that we need to get the object, which currently is the ID as body. But that's not a problem at all, because each of these selections, and if I go back to the selection, we can see it's come out the list of the different selections. So if I did a selection and using a square bracket and hit 0 in there, that's our first one. That's one single part. And if we do that and assign it, so S equals selection and S dot, and there should be a name in here, we can see that's called cylinder. And if I come over to here, the valid internal name down the bottom left is called cylinder. So all we have to do is use my object. Well, that body is, let's take that out, and that's in quotes. Now it's in single quotes. You see I mixed quotes there. Shouldn't really do that. So my object dot capital NAME. Then that should set everything to green. Macro, execute macro. All looks good. Come back, and everything except for this one is green. And what's that? Because I didn't select it. So let's select them all. So we've got the cube, the pad, the body. Execute that macro, and they're all green now. So those are all green. So that's our for loop being used there. So we go through, set them all to green, and that's our first stage. So we clear those out. Now I could do in here the check, but what I'm going to do is just take away that print. I'm just going to do a second for loop. So the first for loop will clear the selection. My second for loop, which I'm going to do with the same for, copy that, paste that in there. I'm just going to use the word continue in here. So continue will continue that for loop. If we execute that, what's happened is that's gone through here and it's just hit continue and gone back up to the top. If I had anything after here, print hello, this would not be printed. You can see it's coming up no selection at the moment. Let's select something. Macro, execute macro. That's the previous one. We've got nothing coming out. Print hello didn't get printed. But if I say in here, print A, macro, execute macro, then we've got those A's coming out. So that hello isn't getting selected. So anything after that continue, it won't do. It will just go back to the top. So that's the continue statement. Normally used with an if, because we can say if condition is true, then we can say just continue and go back to the top of the for and do not do any of the other code. We're going to be making use of the continue statement in our next for loop. At the moment we're going through all of the selections, so we're going to go through and everything that we selected. So if we selected the cylinder, the body and the cube, this will go back through them one by one. What we're trying to do is compare the cylinder with the body and then compare it with the cube, and then move on to the body and compare that with the cube and the cylinder, and finally we do the same with the cube. In that way we're checking to see if any of these bodies have collided or interacted with each other, and we'll colour those. So to do that we first take our first selection, let's say our cylinder, and then we've got to pick up the selections again and check each one of these against that cylinder. Because we've picked up the cylinder in our first selection, when we run our second selection we end up picking up the cylinder again. So if we can show this, and let's get rid of these, and I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to nest a loop in here. We're going to change this, and we're going to call one source and the other one target. In a matter of fact, let's do the same as what we would do with animation. Normally the one we're actually checking with is called the actor, and the others are called the obstacles. And this one, the obstacle. So what's happening here? So our first time we come in, what we're going to do is print the actor equals, and then we're going to append the actor on the end of there. And because this is an object, we can get to the name of this object, .name. In the next for loop, we're going to do the same, but this time we're going to do it for the obstacle. So actor becomes obstacle, and the actor.name becomes obstacle.name. So let's see what happens. I've just placed a few dashes to show that's been indented in there. So let's give this a go. Now I've got a problem here, and that's because I haven't closed the bracket here. So I need to close that bracket. The same on here. Let's just clear this and clear this one. And let's run that macro. So you can see we've got the actor equals the cylinder, and then the next one, it's gone round again, and the obstacle equals the cylinder. And that's because we've only got one selected. So you can see there's only one selected over here. If I select more than one, holding down Control, we can select all those three. Come back in, quickly clear that panel. Macro, execute macros, and you can see what's happening. So we come in, we get the cylinder, and then we go through each of the obstacles in there. So you can see we're going through the first four, 1, 2, 3 times, and the nested 4, 1, 2, 3 times. But it cycles around. So the first cycle we're going through the actor, then it goes into the nested 4, and we get the obstacle. We come out of this 4, and we've still got items in our selection, so we come back up, get the next item, which is now the pad. We cycle through, because we're redefining obstacles in selection, and we get the cylinder, pad and box again. And it continues. We go up, we've still got stuff in our selection, so we're taking the next one and placing it in actor. That comes out as box. And then we come down and we redefine an obstacle in the selection and outputting the obstacles. So this is a nested 4, and we can use this to detect which items in here have collided. We've got a small problem in that when we very first come in, we pick up the cylinder, then we come into our next 4, and we've got a cylinder. So if we selected these two and checked if they're collided, it'll come up as a true because they both sit in the same space, and though it's one shape. But we're checking, so we need to check to make sure that the actor and the obstacle are not the same. So this one here, this is where we've got to do our check. And it's as simple as saying if actor, using the double equals, obstacle, we're going to come in, and we're just going to use continue in here. So it hits here, and it will go back up, and then go to our next selection. Let's clear this and see what happens. If it doesn't go back, it will print the next line. Let's run the macro and see what happens. This is looking a lot better. So it comes in, collects the cylinder, and then it will check against the pad and the box, comes in, collects the pad, checks against the cylinder and the box, and then comes in, gets the box, and will check against the cylinder and the pad. And that's exactly what we want. So you can see how the continue works there. We can get the same effect by saying if actor doesn't equal obstacle, and then just do this here instead of continue. But there's a way of using the continue in there. So this is where I'm going to place my check. We've got these two, which at this point have been taken from the selection. So they will have the dot shape and also the dot proximity as well. So in here is the print obstacle, which I'm just going to leave in for the second. Going back to our box dot shape dot proximity, and in there you pass it a shape. So before we use body dot shape like so, we've got to do the same in here, but instead we do actor dot shape dot proximity, and we're using the obstacle dot shape. And we need to pull in those faces. So for that we use a spread. So remembering that from here we get two lists. We've got nothing in those at the moment because they haven't collided, as you can see on there. So in brackets we place actor faces, comma, obstacle faces, close a bracket, equals that command there. That means we've got these two collections spread across these two variables. Then we need to check if the length of the actor faces is greater than 0 and the length of the obstacle faces is greater than 0. Colon, and then tab into there. So we've got those there. So that's output the result. What I'm going to do is just print in here, add another little indent, 1, 2, 1, 2, in collision. Right, so let's give this a go, but at the moment we've got no selection. So let's select something. So we go over to our scene with our model in there. And I'm going to select this box, control click this body. So we've got the pad and the cube all selected there. Come back in and let's execute that macro. So at the moment they haven't collided, which is correct. And what we're going to do is just move this. So right click and transform. We'll move this so it touches this here. So okay that. Go back to the macro, macro, execute macro. Got no selection at the moment. Select them. Macro, execute macro. You can see that we still haven't got a collision. So let's go back in, and this time let's select our cube and control select our body, like so. So we've got those two selected there. Go to the macro, macro, execute macro, and you can see it's gone into collision there. So it's important to select the correct things in here. Otherwise, if we select this here, we're actually selecting the pad, not selecting the body. So let's add our colors now. For that, I'm just going to copy this here. And bring it down to here. We need 2 copies of this because we're doing one for the actor and one for the obstacle. Got my object.name in there, so this one's going to be actor and this one's going to be obstacle. And at the moment they're green, so let's make them full red. So they're all green at the moment, and if we execute this, we've got no selection, so we've got to select them, cube and the body. Got an in collision, and there we go. So we've got those two collided there. So what happens if we include our cylinder? Let's take the cube, the body, and the cylinder. Macro, execute macro. And we can see the cylinder is still green. So this is working. But here comes a problem if you actually select them from the screen, like so. Macro, execute macro. go back, and you can see this one is now red. It's saying it's in collision. Because we selected the pad rather than the body, then we've got some unexpected results there. So we have to be careful what we select. So we select from this side of the screen, we're okay. Execute macro, and you can see that's worked. And if I take this cube, right click, transform, and that's collide it with the cylinder, like so. Okay, that, and let's select the cube, and let's do them all, the body, and also we want cylinder. We can actually select that one. There we go. Execute the macro, and when we come back, we can see that these two have collided and this one's okay. So there's something to watch out for when you're picking your shapes that you want to collide. Make sure you pick a body rather than a pad. So let's review the code. We can actually start removing some of these prints if we so desire, if we don't want to output them to screen. So we haven't got actually much code here. We first go in and collect the selection. So whatever we selected on screen, we make sure the length of the selection is greater than 0. So we're checking to see if the user's actually selected something in there. We then turn the whole of the selection, every single body and every single part, every single object, to a shade color of green, basically resetting the color. We then step through each of the selections, picking up one as the actor. Once we've picked up one, we then enter another for loop and pick up another one as the obstacle. We check to make sure that we haven't picked up the same object. If we do, we continue and pick up the next object. We then check the proximity between the two shapes, the actor and the obstacle, and spread that across two variables. These will be both lists, because this is pulled back a tuple, and inside that tuple is two lists. The first one is the actor faces that collide with the obstacle, and the second one is the obstacle faces that collide with the actor. There's no need to check two, but we do anyway. We check both the length of the actor faces and the length of the obstacle faces are greater than 0. If so, we change the shape color. So actor.name is the object ID name that we can use in getObject. We change the shape color and make sure the first channel, which is the red, is turned up to max. So we get a red color in there. If we haven't got any selections, then we just output a message to the screen. And that's our first part of the actual clash detection done. So in our next video, we'll make our code a lot more readable by introducing functions and splitting our code into separate containable parts. We'll also look at scope, because functions and scope go hand in hand. Then we'll start to get into the while loop, which will allow us to run our code in real time and have an instant feedback from our screen when we start moving objects around rather than running a macro each time. So I hope you're enjoying the series, and I'll see you again soon. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my site, and also I have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate a few pence or a few pounds, dollars, or whatever your currency is, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0, and there you'll be able to help me fund my site, and all the money that I actually get from any funds will actually get pushed back into the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing. I'll see you next time.